Morning. We're good on the mic. All right. It's great to see everybody today. Weather's beautiful. Wanted to start today by getting kind of nostalgic with the beginning of my journey in this practice, these teachings, and there are people here today, actually, and maybe online, I don't know, that I've encountered, from early on. Roger being one of the instrumental people that got me introduced to this. And I was up in Duluth, which is where I started really exploring these teachings. And Roger had a group that he would sit at the Copper Top Church up on a hill in Duluth. And so Rick Palm is another person, and a couple other people that are part of this community. And so just reflecting on that, I noticed Roger started coming here. I don't know how long it's been from that I've been seeing you recently, but it's been great. And I just wanted to thank you for the strong introduction to the practice and these teachings. And so I hope you don't mind me telling a little bit of my beginning journey. I've told this story before, but I remember a time when I was really new. I didn't know much about these, how to practice, like how to sit correctly, posture, the formalities of Buddhism. And I remember I went up to sit one day at this Copper Tab Church, and I think it might have just been me and Roger. He was kind enough to give me rides at that point in my life because I didn't have a license. I'm not going to go too much into that, but there are reasons, that you've probably heard me say before. So it was just me and Roger, and I was asking, like, when do I get a robe? And I genuinely did not know like what I was asking at that point in time. I had no idea about the significance of robes or what they were. I genuinely thought that they were just to be comfortable when you're sitting. I looked online and was looking at this Buddhist paraphernalia, and I saw people wearing these like robes and comfortable gear when they were sitting. And so that was where I was coming from in my question, but he didn't realize that, he didn't know exactly where I was coming from at that point. And he snapped back and said, "That's what's wrong with people nowadays. They just come to this practice and want the robes right away, So, and I didn't quite, and I was like, oh, that's probably not the wrong topic to bring up, I guess, but that exchange was significant, and I found out why later on, when I started to become exposed to more of the formalities of this practice. And when we see other people, if we go to a Zen place, we'll see the robes and see the rakasus, and when we start to get an understanding about what that is, it'll sort of be inspiring, and it's a goal maybe that we set out to, that we want to get. Well, I want to be the person that has that. I want to be the person that has this. It's our usual way of approaching things, is like, I want to study these teachings so that I can get the degree. I want to go to school so that I can someday earn this amount of money, and it's our usual approach with things. And so the significance of that exchange with Roger is still with me to this day. And I think that is sort of like, I don't know the best way to put this, but it's like one of the pitfalls, I think, of this practice, is where we want to get the thing, So I appreciate that exchange. It really, really stood out to me. And exposing me to the teachings of Ajahn Chah, Food for the Heart. I don't know if this is still a favorite of yours, but it was at the time, certainly. And we discussed this, and I was, reading a lot of literature at that point about these teachings. And that was an instrumental book in my journey. And I still appreciate that book, although I have not circled back to it in a while. And I was thinking before, when I was sitting on the hallway, like, how long it's been. I think that was like 15 or 16 years ago. So it's been quite some time, and it's really great to see people that I've known along the way. And it's kind of, I told you it was kind of nostalgic, the beginning of this. So I apologize for that, but thank you, Roger. And thank you, Rick. And thank you to all the people that I've encountered along the way and expanded it out to all beings, that we're supported by. All right, so and I'd be remiss if I didn't say Rick Palm was actually brought me to my first retreat here at Dharma Field. And boy, was that an experience. I didn't I didn't think I was gonna make it. I don't know if probably everybody remembers their first session, but boy, it's like to sit that long and to be quiet for that period of time and just like the pain. I have bad knees and kind of a bad back and stuff like that. I didn't know if I was going to make it, and I didn't know if I was going to be able to sit out, do Zen practice for the long term because of the pain and stuff like that. It's subsided significantly since then. I'm not going to end that. Thank you for listening. So anyway, on to the actual talk today. So I've been reading this book, Just This Is It. I want to thank Steve Matushak for turning me on to this book. It's very good. And so over the course of the next year, I'll probably be exploring that if I give any public talks. And so it's written by Tigan Dan Layton. And I found a part in here that really stood out to me as being maybe helpful to talk about. So it's called Reaching the Peak. And before I get into the actual exchange that I'm going to be talking about, I want to go through some of the teachings and just to illuminate what it is that'll be highlighted in the passage. So the first one is suchness, known in Sanskrit as ta-ta-ta. This suchness is described in Indian Buddhism as ultimate truth, reality, the source, or the unattainable. So in varying contexts, suchness may refer to our clear perception of reality, or else to the nature of that reality itself. And I want to circle back. That's from the author, Tigan Dan Layton. And so first thing that I circled back to with this was the unattainable. I've heard this before. I've heard some teaching describe the unattainable, and at first that might be sort of like discouraging. Well, if it's unattainable, what's the point? But I think that's kind of a helpful word actually. Because what is it that we're back to the robe conversation? What is it that we're trying to attain? The setup with this is that we're lacking something that we have to attain. We have to get something in order to be happy, joyous, and free, be saved from the mundane, the everyday this and that. And so the unattainable is we don't need to attain something that we already have. Now that is misleading as well, because we don't have, there's not something that we have. There's not an object of mind, maybe even an understanding that we have. We don't need to search for this. It's right here and right now. It always is. And so the unattainable is bringing us back right here, right now, as all these teachings are. And so the other part that I corrected here, as I've been exploring this text and other texts as well, it stood out to me how helpful or not helpful certain wording is, and the author explains, so in varying contexts, suchness may refer to our clear perception of reality. That's pretty good. Or else the nature of that reality itself. And the only thing is like of that reality. Sometimes when things are worded, it might seem like there's an object, of that reality. Well, it's not that reality, it's this reality. with a capital R. It's always just this. And so the reality with a capital R is not something that we have to attain. It's not something that we have to search for, because it's always right here and right now. And so the word ta-ta-ta, of course, this reminded me of Tathagata, which I've heard, the teaching here and Steve breaking down that word. And I've found that very helpful, especially in the past couple of years for whatever reason. It just really stood out to me as being kind of the crux of the whole thing, just breaking down that word. It can be helpful. So Tathagata, as I've heard it explained here, is coming and going thus. And so the tata part is thus or suchness. And thus, suchness is reality with a capital R, totality with a capital T, the whole. The knowledge that this, though nothing in particular, is not nothing. And then the gata part is going or going. It often appears as gone. I was looking this up online and I got a little bit lost. I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. And then agata is come or going. And so this coming and going thus, everything changes. It's impermanent, or at least there appears to be change. And it's also broken down, appears to be coming and going. There appears coming and going. And this is impermanence. And then I was thinking about impermanence and emptiness, and how closely related these terms are. And so impermanence obviously is that, there's change, and emptiness is lack of substantiality and lacking a separate and independent self. And when we think of a self, it's something that would have to be kind of permanent, something that exists separate and apart from the rest of other things. And so I really appreciate Steve Hagen's talk last weekend, where he brought up thus and Nagarjuna's influence on this. Well, there's no thing that's permanent to be impermanent. Very helpful, because if we can't find something persistent to begin with, what is it that's changing? How can we say something changes if it's not permanent to begin with? And so this is pointing out that there's no thing that exists separate and apart from everything else that persists. And if that's the case, what is it that's impermanent? And so this kind of negates impermanence in a way, but it points directly to thusness, just this. So emptiness, this is from the author, as a technical term in Buddhism, is not about some abstract nothingness, but indicates the emptiness or insubstantiality of all persons and entities. Understood as empty or inherent substantive existence, things are empty because of their interdependence, as each particular event is the elaborate product of the dependent causation of many conditions. Nothing exists as a separate entity unto itself. So it stood out to me when I was preparing for this that we often think in terms of substantiality. So when we form ideas and we get our models of the world, it's often an underlying that or with that is like an implicit substantiality that we grant to things, ideas, events, people, places, and things. And I don't think we do this intentionally. It's not like we intentionally do this, but it's almost like with thinking comes the inherent belief in substantiality. And so the underlying sort of like helpfulness of these teachings is to point this out to us and point to how we solidify the world, a world that's otherwise insubstantial. It's empty. It lacks inherent existence. And so this happens so automatically that we often overlook it. And that's where our practice is very helpful for us, to just watch our mind and see, what it is that we're doing, see how we become attached to the ideas, the objects of mind, and the way that we interpret and think about the world. The whole thing, is basically delusion right from the very beginning. And then when we talk about the insubstantiality of objects, we also have the belief that, well, that's insubstantial. That makes sense to me. But we still carry this belief that we are substantial, that we, exist, separate and apart from everything out there that has an impermanence, So suchness or thus is not something to be acquired any more than emptiness is. Suchness is not a thing at all, and neither is emptiness. And this is important. It's important to understand this, that when we hear teachings like thusness or thus, the reality with a capital R, as I've already alluded to, is that this isn't something to be acquired. We don't need to acquire it because this is it. We are inseparable from reality. We're inseparable from just this, always. It's only in our thinking or delusion that we, believe that things are separate and apart, including us. And as soon as we think I, and we believe that we're something real, for lack of a better way to put it, I guess, it's right from there, right from the very beginning, All right. I just wanted to go through a couple of the teachings that are probably going to be helpful, hopefully, as we explore this passage. But before I do that, I noticed, whenever I get into Buddhist study, not whenever, most of the time when I get into Buddhist study and thinking about the teachings and trying to come up with the best way to articulate things, I fall into a sort of trap where it's like I find myself solidifying things, and it's like, what is the meaning of this and what is the meaning of that? And it happened with the word Tathagata. I was like really thrown by what I was seeing online, and I didn't bring any of it with me. I don't remember exactly. And I just wanted to point to a couple of things that Steve Matuszak and Norm actually pointed out that were super helpful. Steve Matuszak, I've been listening to Bendoa online, the course that you recently taught. And there was one part, and I can't remember the context, but he made it a point to say, it's not important to memorize the meaning of the words. It's not important to get the definition down 100% correctly, but it's rather to see what the words are pointing to. And that's often what I need to do when I find myself mulling things over too much and, just really granting these teachings solidity almost. It's like, what exactly is this? What exactly is this teaching in relation to this other teaching? No, I'm not negating that either. Very helpful. It's very helpful. I also wanted to give a kudos to Steve Hagen today for coming up with a language that's very helpful. It's very helpful to have a teacher that breaks these things down in a way that makes, it is very clear, to the point, and brings out the richness of some of these stories and old teachings that we might not otherwise have access to if it weren't for teachers bringing things out, and just the richness of the way that these teachings have been presented through Steve has been very helpful. So Steve Matushak pointed that out. Norm, I had a exchange with Norm that was very impactful, as it usually is for me. I was doing the Mountains and Waters Sutra class, which is a book, actually it's a passage in Shobo Genzo that I went through. And I was getting caught up with, I think it was the difference between interdependent origination and dependent arising. It was one of these things where I couldn't bridge the gap between these two things, and it was muddy in my mind. So I approached Norm in the office and I was like, Norm, what is the difference between these two things? And I don't remember exactly what he said about the specific difference. But the part that jumped out to me and that's stuck with me is like, whenever you notice your mind getting lost or flustered with confusion, just come back to the here now reality. Just come back, it's not important that we pin these things down and that we get the essential understanding of what the author meant maybe, or, because we each interpret things in a slightly different way. So I just really appreciate Norm pointing that out. It's like whenever we get to that place where it's like, what the heck is going on? Just understand that it's always right here, right now. It's never apart from where you are. And so I appreciate that. And Norm is just like so great. And he's done this so many times throughout the years. Just like I'll bring some fancy idea to him and he'll just right to the heart, just bring me back here and now. It's like, thank you for that, Norm. Appreciate it. Told you I was feeling a little bit nostalgic today. Okay, so we'll get on to the actual passage that I want to talk about here. And Mary, before I move on from this nostalgia, thank you for always, like, how do I put this? Mary is so good at like pointing something out that is like a little bit off the beam. If it's off, Mary is going to let you know, and and at first I was like, oh no, how am I gonna deal with this? Mary is the kindest person, and it's been so helpful over the years to have that pointed out. Like when something's a little bit off, it's like it keeps things in check in a way. And I genuinely appreciate that. So if I'm ever looking for feedback after a talk or after I teach a course or something, I always go to Mary, because Mary's not going to mince words and she's going to tell me exactly, what flaw she saw or what didn't sound correct. And Mary, it's been very helpful. So thank you. Yeah. Anyway, moving on. So this is an exchange. I think it was a koan. Dangshan asked the monk, "Where have you come from?" And the monk responded, "From wandering in the mountains." Dangshan asked, "Did you reach the peak?" And the monk said, "Yes." Dangshan asked if there was anyone on the peak. The monk replied, "No, there was not." Dangshan said, "If so, then you did not reach the peak." But the indomitable monk replied clearly, "If I did not reach the peak, how could I have known there was no one there?" After this revelation, Dangshan asked why this monk had not remained on the mountaintop. And the monk replied honestly that he would have been inclined to do so, but there was someone from the west, probably referring to Buddha or Bodhidharma, who would not have approved. Dangshan then praised the monk, saying, "I had wondered about this fellow." Dangshan asked the monk, "Where have you come from?" Oh, I'm sorry, I went into my other comments about this. So that was the exchange. Okay. What I'm going to do is break this down line by line. I think there's a lot to be pulled out from this, actually. I enjoyed going through this. So I'll just go through section by section here. So again, Nangshan asked the monk, "Where have you come from?" And the monk responded, "From wandering in the mountains." Nangshan asked, "Did you reach the peak?" And the monk said, "Yes." Now, initially, when I first read through this, it was an ordinary view of this, ordinary interpretation. So it's like, so there was this monk, and he was walking apparently up to the top of a mountain, ordinary way. And the teacher was asking, "Did you reach the top of this mountain on your hike, out in the wilderness or through the woods or the mountains? Did you reach the peak of the mountain?" So this is just our ordinary view of a mountain and somebody going for wandering in the mountains. Dangshan was likely asking about his understanding. I mean, it for sure was in this story. And so it got me thinking, like, what is mountains actually referring to? When the teacher said wandering in the mountains, well, I taught that course, Mountains and Water Sutra. So this is going to come from there, where in the Mountains and Water Sutra, mountains is like a metaphor for interdependent origination. The teaching that all things and phenomena are the product of an infinite number of causes and conditions. All these causes and conditions are also infinitely interconnected and constantly changing. Hence, all things are impermanent and lack independent existence or persistence. They are empty. So I wanted to stop here and talk about this word existence. And it does imply a sort of persistence when we say something exists. And so just keep that in mind, and I'll point this out a little bit later on as well. So that was the initial part of the exchange. Where have you come from wandering in the mountains? Then he goes on to say, did you reach the peak? And so there's, in the book, the author brings out a koan here, which I think is pretty relevant and helpful. It's Book of Serenity, case 32. Yang Shan once requested a monk to reverse his thought to think of the thinking mind. And this is think, not thinking, closely related in the Fukan Zazengi, which is a fundamental meditation instruction. Watch your mind. Yang Shan then asked if there were many things there. So when the monk was asked to reverse his thinking or her thinking and think of not thinking, were there many things there? The monk said, when I get here, I don't see any existence at all. And again, existence implies persistence. So we might, in our usual everyday thinking, we might think, well, if nothing exists there, that means everything disappears. Everything goes away, and it's just a voidness. It's blackout time or something, But this doesn't negate the appearances. And so never in these teachings is it negating our everyday this and that. It does not negate the relative. Most likely, the monk isn't deceived by appearances. At its apex, reality can be described as not a single thing with no person existent there. And again, our minds might go to, well, if not a thing or no person exists there, it's wink out time, as Steve used to say, or something along those lines. And that's not what this is saying. So just keep that in mind. I don't know why I keep saying that. Dangshan was asking whether the monk had reached the peak of understanding, is essentially what was being asked. Moving on, Dangshan asked if there was anyone on the peak. The monk replied, no, there was not. The monk could be saying that there wasn't anybody at the top of the mountain. Our ordinary view, ordinary understanding. Somebody walks to the top of a mountain. The teacher was asking, well, did you see, somebody on the top of the mountain? Oh. Sounds like a alert of some sort. Yeah. Hopefully everybody's okay. All right, so Dongshan asked if there was anyone on the peak. The monk replied, no, there was not. The monk could be stuck at mountains are not mountains, belief that everything is just one. He could be saying that, yeah, I reached the peak of understanding and I didn't see anything. Everything disappeared. You know, he could be, everything is all one. So not a thing. The appearances go away. I don't think that's necessarily the case. But if he was attached to the self, still had a belief in himself existing or herself existing as separate and apart, that could have been a mistake. Could have been a mistaken view that the appearances were negated at that point. Perhaps the monk was expressing an understanding of emptiness, that they didn't see anything particular. Perhaps the monk was not alluding to things negating things, but that they were able to see what these teachings are pointing out or what the actual understanding is. Moving on, Dangshan said, if so, then you did not reach the peak. And so the teacher kind of calls him out on it. Well, if you didn't see anybody there or anything there, then you didn't reach the peak, because perhaps the monk was still caught in confusion. So he's kind of prodding a little bit more. So ordinary view, again, how would Dangshan, the teacher, know there wasn't anybody at the peak? And I very much followed the usual way when I first read this. So how would the teacher know? Did he go to the top of the mountain, the physical mountain, and see that there wasn't anybody up there? Did he know about this little campsite or something that was on the top of the mountain where he knew, somebody would have been there or something? But here, Dangshan indicates that if nobody was there, then neither was the monk, by definition. And if this peak experience was true emptiness, in which not a thing exists, then neither could this monk exist there. So again, this is not negating the appearances. It's not negating anything. And so if the monk reached the pinnacle of this true understanding, they would have been able to express this. And this is exactly what the teacher was hoping to get from the student, is my speculation. All right, moving on. There was something that came to my mind in the course of preparing for this, and that's Gateless Gate, case 46, and the Book of Serenity, case 79. I don't know what I did there. I got confused, mixed up two different books. So this is, it's in both the books. I think that's what it's saying. So Gateless Gate, case 46, and Book of Serenity, case 79. Shi Shuang said, how do you step from the top of the 100-foot pole? Chang Sha said, you who sit on the top of a 100-foot pole, although you have entered the way, it is not yet genuine. Take a step from the 100-foot pole, and the worlds of the 10 directions are your total body. So the 100-foot pole, so basically what the teacher is pointing out here is that if you reach the top of the 100-foot pole, you don't stay there, The top of the 100-foot pole could be thought of in terms of like the absolute. Everything is one. We can see that there's no separation. And in one, aspect, it might seem like teachers are pointing out that everything is inseparable, that everything is just one. Well, yeah, that's a teaching of the absolute. But it's not that we reach the absolute and that's the end of the journey. There's no end to the journey. But it's like you have to step forward from the 100-foot pole or from that understanding and realize that, the relative and absolute are not separate. We wake up right in the middle of delusion. Delusion is not a bad thing. When we first encounter these teachings, we want to get away from delusion and push that away. And we just want to have the peace and contentment or, rest in the absolute and think that that's the end of our practice. Well, what the teacher is saying is that take a step forward, take a step forward from the top of the 100-foot pole. And this is the merging of difference and unity. But then Indomitable Monk replied clearly, if I did not reach the peak, how could I have known there was no one there? Pretty good. The monk is expressing understanding. The problem is that the monk has to use conventional language to express this. There's no other way, to do this. If you're having an exchange, I just thought of a counterpoint to what I just said, but I'll spare you. He's saying, or she, if I did not reach the peak, how could I have known there was no one there? Please understand that we're forced by language to say words like I. How else would you say this? This is our language that we have to use to express this. And so I did not reach the peak. At that point, I doesn't really hit the mark. But there's no other way to say it. This is a true person. This is what the author points out. He did not hesitate or fade away, but indicated that he was indeed present as a witness to this space without a blade of grass and without heat or cold. Just circling back, I have an issue with, with some of the verbiage here. Present as a witness. So he did not hesitate or fade away, but indicated that he was indeed present as a witness. Well, again, we're forced by language, but it's like at that point, is it that they are present as a witness? Or is it that they're inseparable? That they have this understanding that they can see, italicized see, what this is. And again, it's not an object. It's inseparable from the monk. It's inseparable from the rest of reality with a capital R, totality. And so his presence and response demonstrate the subtlety of Dangshan's teaching of suchness. And so it's just a pretty good representation of Dangshan's teaching of suchness. And where the author points out blade of grass, so the place without a blade of grass. I'm probably going to give a future talk about this. I'm not going to go into it too much. But a blade of grass is basically referring to the phenomenal world, the world of this and that, the relative. And then he also mentions the place without heat or cold. This is a koan, one of my favorites, actually. The author describes heat and cold as worldly affairs. So going beyond worldly affairs or beyond our relative understanding or relative view, which is pretty difficult, by the way. It's so easy to get pulled. It's so easy to get pulled into things, the everyday, things that we have to do. I just speaking from personal experience, I'll share a recent journey of mine where I wanted to be a big shot. It was like I started going to school and getting education and thinking about career stuff and what the ultimate goal was with that. And it's very easy to get caught in that trap of like having your motivations come from this place of attainment, getting the degree, getting the perfect job, the partner, all of that, and recently in the past, 5, 10 years, it was like I was exploring career options and setting up things so that, I could earn a living and that. But at some point, it became a little bit more than that. And it was almost like I found myself at work getting trapped in this like big shot game where it's like, who's going to be the leader? Who's going to be the next person that has control over this or control over that? And it's like, it's very tempting when we engage with the everyday this and that to not get pulled into those things of like, ooh, that person wants this, and suddenly that looks appealing to me, you know. And so I just found myself getting too pulled in that direction of like wanting to succeed as like a leader or something like that, Um, and it's very easy to get pulled. And so I just wanted to recognize and, disclose to you guys that, this stuff is, there's a pull there, Um, but can we come back? Can we come back and recognize what these teachings are pointing to? That this world of this and that, the everyday things, that's not all there is, nor is it otherwise, you know. So stepping off the 100-foot pole is recognition that this doesn't go away. Showing up for work, these things don't go away. However, can we bring ourselves back? Can we watch our mind and step forward, and not be pulled, by these things? So it's a practice. There's no end to this. There's no perfection of this, as far as I know, So it's just continuous practice of bringing yourself back to the here and now, and watching your mind and coming back to the present moment. Anyway, last piece here. So after this revelation, this is the last part of the passage. After this revelation, Dongshan asked why this monk had not remained on the mountaintop. And the monk replied honestly that he would have been so inclined, but there was someone from the west, probably referring to the Buddha or Bodhidharma, who would not have approved. Dongshan then praised the monk, saying, I had wondered about this fellow. I really enjoy the end of this koan or whatever it is. So again, we can't stay at the top of the pole, of the 100-foot pole. That isn't the point. That's not the point of practice, is to, all of a sudden reach the apex of having the understanding of the teachings and, being able to express maybe even the teachings in a way that matches the book. That's not the point. We can't negate, and the point isn't to negate the relative world. The relative and absolute are inseparable. The relative is the absolute, and the absolute is the relative. So this never negates, anything. It's just getting us to realize our own delusion. And if you don't say anything, nobody will understand. Really like that teaching here. We have to say something, and so it's helpful to encounter teachers that are able to point this out. And hopefully we can all, encounter a good teacher. I was just listening to something online yesterday, a YouTube video actually by a Zen teacher that's out there. I've read many of his books and stuff like that. I'm hesitant to say his name. I don't know why. But he was talking about how a lot of Zen centers in the West are often set up with profit motive ultimately being in mind, and so it's like the watering down of the teachings and the practice to attract new customers. And of course, maybe part of that is attracting new customers so that somehow they can help pay for things, and get more resources or something like that. And while I was listening to that, yeah, I agreed with a lot of his points that he was making. And a sense of gratitude came up in my, what I've encountered with these teachings and centers, and particularly here. And I just, from day one, I've never gotten the impression that somebody was trying to get me to do something for a specific reason, other than to wake up, other than to realize what this is, And so basically what this teacher was pointing to is like keeping the practice in our minds pure. And at times it can be hard to do that because we might feel pulled. And I've heard the teachers here talk at different points about how, at different points, just seeing, what we're doing here, is it making sense? Is it helpful? All of the formalities, the practice, the teachings are to help us to wake up and see, understand what these teachings are pointing to. And, I've been coming here for a number of years, and I got to say, I think this center and the way that this has been led, and Steve Matushak, Bev, Steve, like all of our head teachers here have done a pretty good job at keeping us focused. And what's the focus? The focus is to help us wake up. That's it. It's not about the money, it's not about anything except for just coming back to here and now and waking up ultimately to our delusion. I feel like there was one more thing I was going to say, but can't think of it. So, any questions or comments? The last
little bit of exchange.
Yeah. After this revelation, Dongshan asked why this monk had not remained on the mountaintop, and the monk replied honestly that he would have been so inclined, but there was someone from the west, probably referring to Buddha or Bodhidharma, who would not have approved. Dongshan then praised the monk, saying, I had wondered about this fellow. Yeah.
So I have to say something. So impermanence, right? I mean, I think a lot, at least for me, I came here because of impermanence, in that everything in my life was blowing up, and I was losing it. And it was the most horrific feeling, right? And so on the one side of individual impermanence, just me, Kristen, like, ugh, right? But then on the other hand, like now that I'm here and I'm learning things, I love impermanence, right? Because like all the gunk about myself that I don't like, it's like totally changeable, right? And I just think that's like so cool. But the aha that I had today was, okay, got this figured out. But then how do I take that to others, like a second level? So individual level, other level. So person with trauma in my background, right? Like there's a lot of people that I don't like you, you're bad, right? And I think what's so interesting about impermanence is, okay, so if I take it to the next level to other people, I'm so quick to categorize, right? Bad person, good person, bad person, good person. And that forgiveness requires that you allow people to be changeable, not just yourself, but other people. And so the aha that I'm having is that I have to let others do that too, that good side, bad side. But then there's like a whole nother level, right? And that's like the societal level. And I think about our society is based on permanence, right? Like we have jails all over the country based on the fact that these people are evil and we're going to lock them up for 50 years and we don't allow them to change. So then I think the challenge becomes, how do we create structures that allow humanity to change and to be the good and the bad and not to categorize and all that. And I'm constantly thinking at that humanity level. And I just think that's so interesting because like, okay, I can do it here now, even though I hate it, like a lot of the time right now. And I think I can do it at the next level, but then that other level too becomes such a big, cool conundrum. I don't know. So anyway, like huge aha moment. So I'm sorry, I'm not supposed to talk. I told myself I wasn't talking more. But you guys do that to me, so.
Yeah, I would say, don't worry about it too much. You know, I mean, this is, so I wish we had more time to talk about this. What I would say is just come back and keep watching your mind. I mean, ultimately, just like I pointed out in this talk, impermanence isn't an idea, you know. It's of course presented in that way. The teachings are always pointing to the way things actually are. And when we're saying, I wish this person understood impermanence. Well, what about our own mind? You know, what about what are we putting on out there? You know, what are we solidifying within our own mind that, you know, has given us issues, you know? I think, and this is one thing I was gonna say, is I understand that these teachings, you know, and the language that we have to use can seem very confusing, you know, at times, especially when we first encounter this. We should hopefully at some point get beyond impermanence, you know, as an idea. And it's just, it's what they're always pointing to, just this reality with a capital R, you know. And so all this stuff out there, societal, you know, little groups or whatever we form in our mind, recognizing that this is conceptualization of our own mind, you know. And that's where we can wake up, is we can wake up to our own delusion. We can, well, not just our own delusion as a whole, you know. And that's the space where a lot of these teachings can you know, at a certain point we just realize that, wow, these teachings are actually talking from a place where I, you know, can't even say what it is. Is that helpful or not?
Yeah, like I can be the master of my own shit, but then at some higher level, oh. And again, this is my belief in something that I need to blow up, right? Because I cling to this, but I believe that we exist to do something for a greater purpose and a greater world. So if we're gonna collectively make things better for humanity, I can change this, but then at a higher level, we all have to change this to do something. And I guess that goes back to Steve's prior talks and all that, and I should just blow it off and let it go. And, but yeah, but again, I'm a person who, you know, wants everybody to elevate, and I just need to let go of that and just elevate myself.
Yeah. Yeah, all that, yeah. And again, the place without blades of grass, right? Like, this isn't negating any of that. Those motivations are fine, you know. But when this practice is to actually get us to wake up and see delusion, and all of that is delusion, you know. But it doesn't go away. The appearances don't go away. We still got to show up for work. We still, you know, do the best we can to try to help, you know, and you know, do things in the relative world. So that doesn't go away. But this understanding is of the whole, you know. It's reality with a capital R, and with that understanding, the whole picture changes, you know. And it's not a picture, it's just when you can see reality, a lot of that loses its I don't know what more to say about it. Yeah. Watch your mind. I'll watch my mind. You know, I don't know. Anyway, is that, you okay?
Oh, totally.
Okay. Anything else?
I just want to say, it's a good principle, right, to try and save all sentient beings. And why is that? Because we are all sentient beings. We aren't separate from those people that we all want to not suffer.
Thank you.
Thank you.